Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Asif. I'm going to talk about one of the most interesting short stories of Katherine Mansfield, that's The Doll's House. We will have some multiple choice questions in this video after the textual analysis. I'm gonna cover the whole text so that you do not miss out any important point. So kindly bear with me for some time. Let's move on. About the author. Katherine Mansfield, 1888 1923, is the pen name of a prominent modernist writer of short story fiction from New Zealand. She is from New Zealand, remember this, and she is called Kathleen Mansfield Murray. Born Katherine Mansfield Buckham in 1988 into a socially prominent family in Wellington, New Zealand, she was daughter of a banker. She moved to London in 1903, where she attended Queen's College. She is considered one of the best short story writers of her period. She greatly admired the famous Russian playwright, short story writer Anton Chekhov, and incorporated some of his themes and techniques into her writings. She counted among her friends great writers like Virginia Woolf, D.H. Lawrence. Both in her personality and writing, Mansfield is noted for her unconventionality and courage. Her statement, "Life and work are one thing indivisible," can be applied to her own turbulent life and exciting fiction. Characters in the story: Isabella Burnell. Isabella is the oldest daughter of Burnells. She uses her age to assert power over her younger siblings and boasts to her schoolmates about the doll's house. Then Kezia Burnell. Kezia Burnell is the youngest Burnell girl. Isabella is oldest. Kezia is youngest. The little realistic miniature lamp in the doll's house catches her attention. She doesn't understand why Kelvy sister aren't allowed to talk with them or see their doll's house. Lil Kelvy. Lil Kelvy is older Kelvy daughter. She wears a dress made from Burnell's old tablecloth. She accepts the prejudice and teasing directed at her with shame-filled smile and calmness. Else Kelvy. Else Kelvy is youngest Kelvy daughter. Lil Kelvy older. Else Kelvy younger Kelvy daughter. She's a quiet girl with huge owl-like eyes. She rarely smiles or speaks. She holds on to her sister's dress at all times. Aunt Beryl. Aunt Beryl is the Burnell children's aunt. Burnell children means Isabella and Casia, the aunt, who lives at house with them. Aunt Beryl believes the smell of a paint on the doll's house is strong enough to make a person sick. Mean spirited and cruel, at the end of the story she shouts coldly at Kelvy children to leave the courtyard and reprimands Casia for having brought them in. Burnell's mother, Isabella, Lottie, and Casia's mother, allows the girls to bring two children at a time to view Doll's house after school. Her class prejudice is made clear by her rule that children from school may not enter the house, by her refusal to let her daughters ever speak to the working class Kelvy children. Pat. Pat is a servant of Burnell's household. He helps carry the doll's house into the courtyard, picks the girls up from school in a buggy. Lottie Burnell. Lottie is the middle sister of Burnell girls. She defers to Isabella's authority. So these are some of the characters. Remember them. Textual analysis of short story The Doll's House. I will be reading the text wherever I feel things are important. I will stress on those points. When dear old Mrs. Haye went back to town after staying with Burnells. So Mrs. Haye, remember this name? She sent the children a doll's house. It was so big that Carter and Pat carried it into a courtyard. There it stayed, propped up on the two wooden boxes beside the feed room door. No harm could come to it. It was summer. Perhaps the smell of paint would have gone off by the time it had to be taken in. for really the smell of paint coming from the doll's house, sweet of old Mrs. Haye, of course, more sweet and generous. But the smell of paint was quite enough to make anyone seriously ill. In Aunt Beryl's opinion, even before sacking was taken off, and when it was. There stood the doll's house, dark, oily spinach green picked out with bright yellow. So, doll's house, dark spinach green, bright yellow. Its two solid little chimneys, glued on the roof, were painted red and white. Door, gleaming with yellow varnish, was like a little slab of toffee. Four windows, real windows, were divided into panes by a broad streak of green. There was actually a tiny porch, too, painted yellow, with big lumps of congealed paint hanging along the edge. But perfect, perfect little house. Who could possibly mind the smell? It was a part of the joy, part of the newness. Open it quickly, someone. The hook at the side was struck fast. Pat pried it open with his penknife, and the whole house front swung back. Pat, servant, he pried it open, forced it open. There you were, gazing at one and the same moment into the drawing room. There was a drawing room, a dining room, the kitchen, two bedrooms. That is the way for a house to open. Why don't all the house open like that? How much more exciting than peering through the slit of a door into a mean little hall with a hat stand. There was a hat stand and two umbrellas. That is, isn't it? What you long to know about house when you put your hand on the knocker. Perhaps it's the way God opens houses at the dead of night when he is taking a quiet turn with an angel. Oh, the Burnell children sounded as though they were in despair. It was too marvelous, it was too much for them. They had never seen anything like that in their life, remember. All the rooms were papered. There were pictures on the wall, painted on the paper, with gold frames complete. Red carpet covered all the floor except the kitchen. So red carpet was everywhere except the kitchen. Red plush chair in the drawing room, green in the dining room, tables, beds with real bedclothes, a cradle, stove, a dresser with tiny plates and one big jug. But what Kezia liked more than anything, what she liked frightfully, was the lamp. Remember this, very important. Kezia liked lamp. It stood in the middle of the dining room table, an exquisite little amber lamp with a white globe. It was even filled all ready for lighting, though of course you couldn't light it, but there was something inside that looked like oil and moved when you shook it. The father and mother dolls, so there were father and mother dolls too, who sprawled very stiff as though they had fainted in the drawing room. Their two little children asleep upstairs were really too big for the doll's house. They didn't look as though they belonged, but the lamp was perfect. It seemed to smile at Casia and to say, I love here. So as if lamp says this to Casia. The lamp was real. The Burnell children could hardly walk to school fast enough the next morning. They burnt to tell everybody, to describe, to well, to boast about their doll's house before school bell rang. I'm to tell, said Isabella, because I am the eldest and you two can join in after, but I'm to tell first. Isabella says that she will tell everyone first about the doll's house. There was nothing to answer. Isabella was bossy, but she was always right. Lottie and Kezia knew too well the powers that went with being eldest. They brushed through the thick buttercups at the road edge and said nothing. And I am to choose who is to come and see it first. Mother said I might, for it had been arranged that while the doll's house stood in the courtyard, they might ask girls at school, two at a time, to come and look, not to say stay to tea, of course, or to come traipsing through the house, but just to stand quietly in the courtyard while Isabella pointed out the beauties. Lottie and Kezia looked pleased. But hurry as they might, by the time they had reached the tarred palings of the boys' playground, the bell had begun to jangle. They only just had time to whip off their hats, fall into line before the roll was called. Never mind, Isabella tried to make up for it by looking very important, mysterious, and by whispering behind her hand to the girls near her, "Got something to tell you at playtime." Playtime came. Isabella was surrounded. She was surrounded. The girls of her class nearly fought to put their arms around her, to walk away with her, to beam flatteringly, to be her special friend. She held quite a court under the huge pine trees at the side of the playground. Nudging, giggling together, the little girls pressed up close, and the only two who stayed outside the ring were two who were always outside, the little Kelvies. Remember this, the poor girls. They knew better than they knew better than to come anywhere near the Burnell. For the fact was, school the Burnell children went to was not at all the kind of place their parents would have chosen if there had been any choice, because there was no choice for Burnell to admit their children to school except this one. But there was none because there was no choice. It was only school for Miles, and the consequences was all children of the neighborhood, the judges, little girls, daughters, doctors' daughters, storekeepers' children, the milkmen were forced to mix together. Not to speak of there being an equal number of rude, rough little boys as well. But the line had to be drawn somewhere. It was drawn at Calvi's. Many of many of the children, including the Burnells, were not allowed even to speak to them, to Kelvies. They walked past the Kelvies with their heads in the air as they set the fashion in all matters of behavior. The Kelvies were shunned by everyone. They were ignored. Even the teacher had a special voice for them and special smile for other children when little Kelly came up to her desk with a bunch of dreadfully common looking flowers. They were daughters of a spry, hard-working little washerwoman. So Kelvy's mother was a washerwoman who went about from house to house by day. This was awful enough. But where was Mr. Kelvy? Nobody knew for certain, but everybody said he was in prison. Kelvy's father was in prison. Everybody supposed that. They were daughters of a washerwoman and a jailbird. Very nice company for other people's children. And they looked it. When Mrs. Kelvy made them so conspicuous was hard to understand. The truth was they were dressed in bits given to her by the people for whom she worked. Lil, for instance, who was stout, plain child with big freckles, came to school in a dress made from green art such tablecloth of the Burnell. So Lil was wearing a cloth which was made from tablecloth of the Burnells with red plush sleeves from the Logan's curtains. Her hat perched on top of her high forehead was a grown-up woman's hat. She was a very small child but was wearing a very big hat. Once the property of Miss Lecky's hat, the postmistress. It was turned up at the back and trimmed with a large scarlet quill. What a little guy she looked. It was impossible not to laugh. Her little sister else wore a long white dress rather than a nightgown and a pair of little boy's boots. Whatever else wore, she would have looked strange. She was a tiny wishbone of a child with cropped hair, enormous solemn eyes. Little white owl, little white owl. They were compared with an owl. Nobody had ever seen her smile. She scarcely ever spoke. She went through life holding on to Lil, with a piece of Lil skirt screwed up in her hand. Where Lil went, else followed. In the playground, on the road, going to and from school, there was a Lil marching in front and else holding on behind. Only when she wanted anything, she was out of breath. Else gave Lil a tug, twitch, and Lil stopped and turned round. The Kelvys never failed to understand each other. Now they hovered at the edge. You couldn't stop them listening. When the little girls turned round and sneered, Lil, as usual, gave her silly, shamefaced smile. Else only looked. Isabella's voice, so very proud, went on telling. The carpet made a great sensation. The carpet in the doll's house. But so did the beds with the real bedcloth, the stove with an oven door. When she finished, Kezia broke in. You've forgotten the lamp, Isabella. Oh, yes, said Isabella. And there is a little teeny little lamp, all made of yellow glass, with a white globe that stands on the dining room table. You couldn't tell it from a real one. The lamp's best of all, cried Casia. She thought Isabella wasn't making half enough of the little lamp. But nobody paid any attention. Isabella was choosing the two who were to come back with them that afternoon and see it. She chose Emmy Cole and Lena Logan first to look at Doll's house, at her home. When the others knew they were all to have a chance, they couldn't be nice enough to Isabel. One by one, they put their arms round Isabella's waist and walked her off. They had something to whisper to her, a secret. Isabella's my friend. Only the little Kelvys moved away forgotten. Little Kelvys, they were ignored. There was nothing more for them to hear. Days passed. As more children saw the doll's house, the fame of it spread. It became the one subject, the rage. One question was, have you seen Burnell's doll's house? Oh, ain't it lovely? Haven't you seen it? Oh, I say. Even the dinner hour was given up to talking about it. The little girls sat under the pines eating their thick mutton sandwiches and big slabs of Johnny cake spread with butter, while always as near as they could get sat Kelvys, else holding on to Lil, listening to, when they chewed their jam sandwiches out of newspaper soaked with large red blobs. Mother, said Casia, can't I ask Kelvy just once? Certainly not, Casia. But why not? Run away, Casia. You know quite well why not. So she is angry. Casia's aunt is angry at her when she asks her whether she can invite Kelvys at home. So kind of class difference. At last, everybody had seen it except them, except Kelvys. On that day, the subject rather flagged. It was dinner hour. Children stood together under the pine trees. Suddenly, as they looked at the Kelvys eating off their paper, always by themselves, always listening, they wanted to be horrid to them. Emmy Cole started the whisper. Little Kelvy is gonna be a servant when she grows up. Oh, oh, how awful, said Isabella Burnell. She made eyes at Emmy. Emmy swallowed in a very meaningful way, nodded to Isabel as she'd seen her mother do on those occasions. It's true, it's true, it's true, she said. Then Lena Logan's little eyes snapped. Shall I ask her? She whispered. Bet you don't, said Jessie May. Oh, I am not frightened, said Lena. Suddenly she gave a little squeal and danced in front of other girls. Watch me now, said Lena, sliding, gliding, dragging one foot, giggling behind her hand. Lena went over to Kelvys. Lil looked up from her dinner. She wrapped the rest quickly away, or else stopped chewing. What was coming now? Is it true you are gonna be a servant when you grow up, Lil Kelvy? Shrilled Lena. How rude on her part. Dead silence, but instead of answering, Lil only gave her silly, shamefaced smile. She didn't seem to mind the question at all. What a sell for Lena. The girls began to titter. Lena couldn't stand there. She put her hands on her hips. She shot forward. Yeah, your father is in prison, she hissed spitefully. This was such a marvelous thing to have said. The little girls rushed away in a body. deeply, deeply excited, wild with joy. Someone found a long rope and they began skipping. Never did they skip so high, running out so fast, do such daring things as on that morning. In the afternoon, Pat called for Bernal children with the buggy. They drove home. There were visitors. Isabel and Lottie, who liked visitors, went upstairs to change their pinafores. But Kezia thieved out at the back. Nobody was about. She began to swing onto the big wide gates of the courtyard. Presently, looking along the road, she saw two little dots. They grew bigger. They were coming towards her. She now could see that one was in front and one close behind. Now she could see that they were Calvies. Casia stopped swinging. She slipped off the gate as if she was going to run away. Then she hesitated. Calvies came nearer. Beside them walked their shadows, very long, stretching right across the road with their heads in the buttercups. Casia clambered back on the gate. She had made up her mind. She swung out. Hullo, she said to the passing Kelvies. They were so astounded that they stopped. Lil gave her silly smile. Else stared. You can come and see a doll's house if you want to, said Kezia, and she dragged one toe on the ground. But at that Lil turned red, shook her head quickly. Why not? Asked Kezia. Lil gasped. Then she said, Your ma told our ma you wasn't to speak to us. You can imagine this is a really very emotional line where I'll repeat. Lil gasped. Then she said, Your ma told our ma you wasn't to speak to us. Oh well, said Kezia. She didn't know what to reply. It doesn't matter. You can come and see a doll's house all the same. Come on, nobody's looking. But Lil shook her head still harder. Don't you want to? Asked Kezia. Suddenly there was a twitch, a tug at Lil's skirt. She turned round. Else was looking at her with big, imploring eyes. She was frowning. She wanted to go. For a moment Lil looked at our Else very doubtfully, but then our Else twitched her skirt again. She started forward. Kezia led the way. Like two little stray cats, they followed across the courtyard to where the doll's house stood, like two stray cats. There it is, said Kezia. There was a pause. Lil breathed loudly, almost snorted. Else was still as stone. I'll open it for you, said Kezia, kindly. She undid the hook and they looked inside. There is a drawing room and the dining room. That's it, Kezia. Oh, what start they gave, Kezia. It was Aunt Beryl's voice. They turned round. At the back of the door stood Aunt Beryl, staring as if she couldn't believe what she saw. How dare you ask little Kelvies into the courtyard? Said her cold, furious voice. You know as well as I do, you are not allowed to talk to them. Run away, children, run away at once, and you don't come back again, said Aunt Beryl, and she stepped into the yard, shooed them out as if they were chickens. Off you go immediately, she called, cold and proud. They did not need telling twice. Burning with shame, shrinking together, Lil huddling along like her mother, Else dazed. Somehow they crossed a big courtyard, squeezed through the white gate. Wicked, disobedient little girl, said Aunt Beryl, bitter to Kezia. She slammed the doll's house too. The afternoon had been awful. A letter had come from Willie Brent, a terrifying, threatening letter saying if she did not meet him that evening in Pullman's bush, he'd come to the front door and ask the reason why. But now that she had frightened those little rats of Kelvies and given Kezia a good scolding, her heart felt lighter. That ghastly pressure was gone. She went back to the house, humming. When the Kelvies were out of sight of Burnell's, they sat down to rest on a big red drain pipe by the side of the road. Lil's cheeks were still burning. She took off the hat with quill and held it on her knee. Dreamily they looked over the hay paddocks, past the creek, to the group of wattles where Logan's cows stood waiting to be milked. What were their thoughts? Presently a else nudged up close to her sister, but now she had forgotten the cross lady. She put out a finger and stroked her sister's quill. She smiled her rare smile. I seen the little lamb, she said softly. Then both were silent once more. Now some MCQs, multiple choice questions on the text. Who is the oldest of Burnell sisters? So, Isabel. What object in the doll's house is Kezia's favorite? The little lamp. What does Casia do that makes Aunt Beryl angry? She comes home late from school. She gives Kelvis some food from house. She shows doll's house to Kelvis. Yes, third one. She shows the doll's house to the Kelvis. Which family is notoriously poor in the story? It's very simple. The Kelvis. Who is the author of the story? Katherine Mansfield. What in the story symbolizes kindness and genuineness? Smell of paint, lamp, Kelvy's children's clothes, the doll's house. Kelvy, children's clothes. What in the story might symbolize poverty? The Kelvy's clothing. Where do the Kelvy children get their clothing? Cast off from their mother's various employers, flea market, fancy store, church donation. So this is the answer. Why are Kelvy's girls treated so poorly? Because their family is poor, considered to be very low class. In the doll's house, which of the following most likely drives Kezia's attempt to let Kelvy girls see doll's house? Her rebellious nature, her desire to be kind, her need to show off, her wish to act superior. Second one is the correct answer, because she behaves kindly. What do Burnell children, especially Isabel, gain from having the doll's house? A new attitude towards life, even more status than before, additional improved playtime, a better understanding of beauty. So you can see even more status than before because of the doll's house. Which of the following is the least effective theme of the story? Children often treat their peers according to the way their parents treat those peers. Those who have greater privilege should consider sharing with those of less means than them. Division between class can ultimately create outcasts. Friends are most important things in life. Is the least effective theme. Can ultimately create. Friends are the most important things in life. Those who have greater privilege should consider sharing less means, those of less means than them. Treat their peers according to the way their parents treat those peers. So which one is correct one? Least effective theme. So you can say the last one, the friends are the most important things in life. Who narrates the doll's house? Aunt Beryl, Kezia, Katherine Mansfield, unnamed. So unnamed third person narrator. What genre is Doll's House? Soap opera, novel, stage play? It's a short story. Who gives Doll's House to the Burnells? Pat, Mrs. Kelvy, Mrs. Haye, Aunt Beryl. Mrs. Haye. Who is Pat? Burnell girl's father, Mrs. Hayes' husband, Burnell's servant, Kelvy's father, Burnell's servant. In what season is the story set? Summer. Where is Doll's house kept? In the courtyard. Why is Doll's house left outside? Because it smells of paint. What colors are Doll's house? Dark green, spinach green, and yellow. So dark green and yellow. When Mansfield writes that doll's house door is like a little slab of toffee, it is an example of what literary device, like a little slab of coffee. So it is a simile. Who is the eldest Burnell daughter? Kezia. Oldest is Isabel. After receiving the doll's house, what do the girls plan to do at school? Boast about the doll's house. Who doesn't come near the Burnell at school? Kelvies, because they were shunned, ignored by other children. How do girls at school respond to the news of the doll's house? They surround Isabel and compete for her affection. How many girls at a time are allowed to come over to see the doll's house? Two girls at a time. In the context of the story, what are buttercups? A type of candy flower cup for holding butter. They are the flowers. Where is the doll's house set? US, Australia, England, New Zealand. New Zealand. Why don't Burnell parents approve of their children's school? Students' body comprises kids from different social classes. Who do Burnells shun? Kelvies. What is the Kelvy's mother's job? She is a washerwoman. What is Kelvy's father's job? He is rumored to be in prison. He is called as a jailbird. What is notable about Kelvy's clothing? It's made from the scrap cloth that comes from wealthy families, like from tablecloth and curtains. Which animal is else Kelvy compared to? They are compared with actually stray dogs. So you can say dog, stray dog. Thank you very much for your patience. Hope you've enjoyed and understood the text very well. Kindly subscribe and click on the bell icon to get more videos like that. Thank you very much.